Welcome to the DevReady podcast. On today's episode of the DevReady podcast, I have Leisa joining me. Thanks for joining me, Leisa.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be chatting with you today.
Oh, it's gonna be a great episode. I can feel it. What I'll do is I'll let you introduce yourself so I don't wreck anything, and you can explain to everyone who you are and what you do.
Great, thank you. So my name is Leisa Hart. I'm the partner and co-founder of AI Adaptive, and we're a business that's really focused on how you supercharge workplace performance in an intelligent way. So that's looking at how you really uplift human capabilities and leverage AI intelligent capabilities in the business. So we do everything from helping businesses understand where their culture is at now, where their workforce is at now, and where it needs to be future fit, and sort of helping them on that journey, identify some of those bottlenecks and helping create high-performing teams at a leadership level, and really looking to make AI in the workplace something that serves humans and not the other way around. So, we've been in this space since 2019. It's rapidly changed in the last 2 years as it has for, just about everybody, with the evolution and explosion of large language models that are now more readily accessible. So it's a great time, I think, to be thinking about the role that we play as leaders in organisations and the role that technology plays in that context.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up with tech and AI and thinking that's what it's about, not that it's a tool that's meant to support.
Yeah, yes. And we often see it in the context of being seen as a silver bullet to solve a whole bunch of problems, whether that's productivity or whether it's, some performance issues. It's seen as something that'll just come in and solve everything. And I don't think the expectations of intelligent technology yet are very realistic. There's some really good research coming out of Gartner where they definitely show that the expectation of the technology is not yet aligned to the realities of what it is to be having it in your organisation and how it is leveraged. So we're also constantly having those conversations with executives about where it is and what the practicalities are. And no doubt there is some very good opportunities to increase efficiency and look at different ways of creating better customer experiences through the use of some of the technology, particularly conversational AI. There's a really good use case for that in call centres that is a much better experience than the previously known, chatbots, also known as shitbots.
Yep.
I think it's a really exciting time to be in the space that we're in and helping leaders make sense of it for themselves, first and foremost, but also then what does it mean for their team and their culture in their business so that they do get those benefits.
Yeah, I think it's such a shifting landscape. So you said in the last 2 years, so the rise of ChatGPT, as I've been terming it.
Yes.
You were in it from 2019 with probably traditional AI and machine learning techniques and how to bring in those...
robotic process automation, yes.
And how to position your business for collecting the large data, then processing it, training on it, and then how do you actually implement that model. But I think with ChatGPT, everyone just assumed that we're almost at like Terminator or Matrix type at levels of AI where they're not going to attack us, but they can do everything. But I've been terming it as glorified autocomplete, and that's probably the best way to explain.
Glorified.
Autocomplete. Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing as well. Like it's just predicting the next words in the sentence, where your phone will do it for 1 or 2 words at a time. This is doing an entire sentence at a time.
Yeah.
So I think, there's definitely a misalignment on what people's expectations are versus what it can actually deliver.
And it's also, there's a couple of things wrapped up in that, and I like the way that you phrase it. Getting back to the Terminator reference, there is a genuine fear of AI because of that language and because of that misunderstanding. And there's a lot of stories in the press every week in the media, on LinkedIn, that are really around creating this sense of fear about people's roles being stolen. And it's such an unbalanced conversation, because there are absolutely new roles that are created with the rise of intelligent technologies. So our job as humans, and inside and outside of work, is to understand the technology. And we talk about that as being AI fluent. So how do you understand it so that you can use the terms and understand what that means when you're talking, certainly from a leader perspective, when you're talking to your people. So in and of itself, you're not driving fear just because you're using the wrong language. And when you build your AI fluency, you actually, by the very nature, start to understand the capabilities and where things are. So you start to understand more realistic expectations of the technology. So when we're in a place of fear as human beings, we actually shut down some really critical access in our brain to really important parts that ordinarily help us navigate circumstances of change. So it's our job to make sure that as leaders we're engaging people and we're having them have the best opportunity to access parts of their brain around, their perception of view, previous experience, how does that help me now? Being much more creative and collaborative with others, and thinking about the opportunities and where this could actually help them in their work, versus just trying to shut down and be protectionist and, really sort of conserve. And that's a really normal and natural response for our brains in the context of any change, really, because the brain doesn't like change. The brain likes efficiency. So it looks to quickly understand things and use things that we've done before. So when something's new and out of context, sometimes, that does create that sense of retreat in the brain versus leaning in and being curious. So we talk about that a lot with our clients, because once you understand that as a foundation, and particularly as a leader, you can then understand the power of your language and the best way to engage people. So there's that component of AI, the Terminator. So really trying to bust that myth right up front. There are critical roles in businesses that will be significantly disrupted, and they are now. But there are also those opportunities of those skills of those people in those roles to be pivoted into new roles, new types of jobs that are created on the back of, the rise of intelligent technology. And that's the conversation that we're looking to drive more and more in businesses, because, people are, the biggest asset in a company. And so if you can harness that and support people to be their best selves, build on their skills over time, that just adds more and more to that asset base in your business. It's really expensive to replace people. We know that. Yep. And if you've got someone in a call centre and you're reducing your call centre workforce because of conversational AI capabilities, which is a really current use case, those people are the people who know the most about the products and services that you offer, because they have to. And that's part of what you've spent all that money training them to do in your business. They generally understand a lot about your customers, what they're calling about, what they're concerned about, what they're hopeful for, a whole bunch of things about your customers. So they're the ideal people to pivot into new types of roles around leveraging that knowledge that they have about your business into new products and services. So offering other sort of proactive services to clients based on the knowledge that they have. And, there's just so many ways that you can take those roles into new types of roles in an organisation. So we say to leaders, don't just look at this as a way to, get rid of a whole bunch of talent in your business. See how you can keep that talent, because genuinely, typically their expectation of the technology is not necessarily realistic. And so they get rid of people, and then they realise, actually, we haven't got the outcomes we need yet from the technology, so we need to get some people back, and that's where it becomes really expensive.
Yeah, I think there's two ways you can look at it. It does improve efficiency in certain ways. So as a leader, you probably have a decision to make: is, do I cut and try and get the same amount of work done with less resources and assets available to me? Or do you try and leverage that and then take your business to the next level and scale, because now you can get more done with the same amount of people? rather than the same amount of work done with less people.
Yeah, and that's a great way of phrasing it. And, you know, at the end of the day, each business is going to be unique. You know, it's got a unique set of challenges, and that's partly driven by the culture of the business as well. You know, what are the leaders doing and saying on a regular basis? What are those everyday habits that everybody has in the business? That will be an indicator for where that business needs to go or wants to go from a strategic direction, as well as the opportunity in the market. And so we don't make any judgment on what that business is doing. What we advocate for strongly and really call this out as a duty of care for leaders is that if you are wanting to reduce your headcount, you know, firstly, get really clear about what that means. Secondly, you can do that in a very respectful way. So you can look at how you support people to move into other roles, move into other industries, move into other, sectors, and think about it in the context of you've got a group of people who are part of your culture, and how do you help them respectfully transition to their next opportunity? And you can do that throughout placement, which is an expensive way of doing it. And also there are alternative ways that are less expensive. But how do you do that so that the people who are remaining look at that and feel cared for? They see their colleagues being cared for, so that they know that if the opportunity comes where they can step into something either up in the organisation or out of the organisation to something else, that they'll be supported through that process as well. So it's a really important point to look at how are you thinking about your culture more holistically through the actions of your everyday conversations with your people, both, you know, in this phase where it might be messy and uncertain, but also where you're wanting to go in the future of the business and what that means to people.
Yeah, and I think that sort of touches back on where you mentioned that sort of AI fluency. So understanding not just how to talk about it, but understanding what it's actually capable of, so you can make that right decision on where do you repurpose those people, or how do you put them into more higher value tasks rather than just cutting, so you can try and get more out of them. And then if you do have to make that decision where, all right, we can't operate with 2 people less or whatever the decision may be, and you just mentioned do that the right way according to your culture, and don't just cut for the bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah, and as I said, that, you know, sometimes businesses don't necessarily have a choice because of pressures, right? There's a lot of pressure on, you know, productivity and, reducing expenses as well in business and costs. And also, these are humans. These are people who have families. These, you know, are potentially people that are connected to, you know, most likely connected to the people who will remain in your business. So how do you preserve that? How do you preserve those relationships? How do you respect the contribution that they've made? There's always going to be people in that bucket that people are very happy to have leave their organisation. And that's unfortunate because this isn't the time necessarily to do that. The time to do that is in the moment when they're not performing. Now it's not the time to go, hey, it's a great time to clean out the cupboards. It's just not the way to do it. Yeah. Unfortunately, though, some people see it as the best way, and that's a reflection on those leaders and their inability to have those crucial conversations and to do it ongoing, not just wait for a moment where they see it as an opportunity to drop a whole bunch of resources, some of which should have probably have left the organisation a long time ago. Because, again, coming back to the people that exist in your business and stay, they can see that. They can see that those habits are not being tackled. They can see that the behaviours that are coming out of some people who probably should no longer be in your organisation, that just is sort of left untouched. So those things should be separated out. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. So there are always opportunities for businesses to look at what's working in our business now and what do we need to change moving forward to have that future fit workplace. Because we know a lot of what we've done in the past isn't necessarily going to serve us moving forward. There are things that exist in organisations, particularly big organisations, where they probably should have tackled it a while ago, such as silos, that protectionism of, what happens in finance never touches marketing, or operations sort of have their own sort of swim lane and everybody else is hands off. That can't exist in the future because the data has to be shared, the resources have to be shared, and the teams have to collaborate across the business, not just down. They go down into their specialised areas for that depth of knowledge and expertise, but that has to come up and surface and be shared more openly, because that's how intelligent technologies will need to work in businesses. So, there's a whole series of things that we need to look at now in terms of what happens within the culture of the business and where are those we call them human bottlenecks, based on the work of Professor David Rock. Dr. David Rock, is where are those sticking points? So where is the technology going to get to a point where it just bumps into a person, or a process that's not working that's held up by a person, or several people for that matter, because there are those bottlenecks. So you've got to look at how you address those proactively starting now, because those things will take time, but you'll get that longer term benefit.
Yeah, and I can see how this problem probably it's a bigger problem the larger the organisation is, because you'll have more of these compounding issues, the more teams, more silos, more individual people. But I think it comes down to if you're cutting resources because you've got this technology available to you now, and you haven't actually fixed the symptoms of those people that should have been gone a while ago, or you're not enforcing the right culture then as well. Like you mentioned, everyone else can see that, all right, this person keeps getting away with stuff, or they're not doing their work, and it starts building the animosity across the team, and that doesn't get resolved. So it just continues.
Yeah, it kind of festers, right?
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah. And none of this is new. This has existed in organisations forever. And to your point, it can be more complicated the bigger the organisation, or not. It really depends on the leaders, starting with the CEO, arguably starting with the board. But, starting with the CEO and then that executive leadership team, how are they working in alignment? How are they consistently having messages and working in service of each other and their team goals? And then how does that filter down to the leadership layer below them and so forth? Because if you can have that consistency and what's called coherence in brain-friendly terms, where, what we're saying and what we're doing are aligned, and that kind of naturally and intuitively makes sense to people because it's what they're expecting. So, for example, we've got a strategy to be, customer focused. Well, then everything that you're doing in an organisation needs to deliver on that. So if you start doing something that's not about being customer focused, then that becomes a bit confusing for people. So it's about making sure that CEO and their leadership team are completely aligned. And when they're not, that's also really obvious. When you see those executives who are competing and not necessarily working in service of their team, their one team, we call it, so their first team, that's where there's opportunities for disconnection underneath and, working in silos and the protectionist behaviour that you might see that comes from the opportunity, because they know that their leader and the exec of another team don't necessarily like each other or work together very well. So, yeah, there's a lot in there, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. If your leaders are doing a great job and they're clear on the strategy, they're clear on the culture and their role in being the curators of making sure that the culture comes to life in the right way, they've got some clear values, they hold people accountable to those. There are opportunities to celebrate people who are doing it well. And, when there's areas that aren't working, that's also done really respectfully and timely, and, you know, people move on. So not necessarily move on out of the business, although that can be the outcome. It's that things are tackled and progressed. Because the number one thing that motivates humans is progress in all different shapes, but progress. So if they can see that things are progressing, they're not just sort of ignored or hope that that'll go away or just not addressed. That's when things start to kind of fester and people don't like it and they get upset about it.
Yeah, and these are normal things that every organisation has to deal with. It's not just because AI is here now. This is something we have to worry about. There's always been little changes and improvements and things, and it probably comes down to if the board and the CEO are not living the values and missions that they're talking about and the culture that they want to grow. If they're not doing that every day and it just becomes a once a year announcement to the company, that's probably when you see all that misalignment and those issues.
Yeah, and as you said, these things have always existed in businesses, in different shapes, in different organisations, obviously. Some organisations have a much clearer expectation around culture and what's accepted and what's not, and that's tight and it's dealt with when it's, you know, people aren't aligned to that, and others don't know how to, they kind of put some words on a page and say, hey, everyone do that, and then they just think that'll happen, where it's you know, people in organisations, it's just a series of relationships, and we know what it's like in our personal life. You have to do the work. Yeah. You have to build connection. You have to build communication between individuals and teams. So you can't just put up some words on a wall and hope that, hey, everyone knows what that means and we're done now. And so it really is something that has been there for a long time in organisations and will continue to exist in the future. The difference with intelligent technologies coming into the workplace is that they will amplify anything that isn't working. And it will, by the very nature, put more pressure on human-to-human relationships, just like we've seen with social media over the last few years. You know, those human-to-human relationships have got kind of a lot more pressure. People feel like there's an opportunity to be a keyboard warrior and hide behind, you know, tapping something into a social media feed and not having to have a real conversation face-to-face with someone or in a you know, respectful way necessarily. So yes, these problems have existed. They will be amplified moving forward. And that's the rub. That's where leaders need to start to do the work. And we do cultural diagnostics. We look at that AI readiness. So where are you now? Where are you going to? What is it that's going to enable the success of, you know, intelligent technologies coming into your business? And where are the disruptors and the blockers? So what are the things that are going to get in the way? Mostly we look at that from the human perspective, but we also work with a tech partner who can look at that from a technology perspective in terms of the architecture and so forth. But we look at what we call, you know, the future workforce and their adaptive ability to be adaptive. So, you know, that they've got the skills to thrive in the future of work. What does that mean? You're looking at their change resilience and building that capability to be nimble and move and know that there's a set of ground rules and some opportunities that stay there and some things that stay the same in terms of leveraging opportunities. So these are the habits and the behaviours we want in our business that will exist no matter what the technology is doing. And then how do they, as an individual, feel like they're being supported to build their capabilities in line with the intelligent technology disruption in their business? So what skills have they got? Where's their data literacy at? Where's their digital literacy at? You know, how are you helping people make sense of this? Just like we've seen organisations try to build awareness of cybersecurity in businesses, this now needs to go much more into data and digital capabilities to build that AI fluency, as we talked about before. And then where are the cultural dynamics? So looking at the everyday mindset, habits and behaviours of people, which is what culture is. It's how we do things really around here. It's how we have those conversations that support each other or hold each other to account. And where are the bottlenecks in that are going to disrupt intelligent technology moving forward? Sometimes that's about silos. Sometimes that's about that real protectionism of, well, we've always held this data sacredly, secretly in our little team or function. What do you mean, other people need access to that now? And, and data and knowledge is power for individuals. So how do you break that down and go, actually, it's something that needs to elevate everybody and in service of better customer outcomes and better shareholder outcomes. And then the third thing that we look at is that human architecture. So how are your teams structured and how's the organisation structured to leverage the opportunities of intelligent technology moving forward? So everything that kind of supercharges workplace performance in an intelligent ways from that human side is where we have our core products and services and our expertise. Deb, my business partner, Dr. Deborah Panapucci, and I have worked together for almost 10 years now, I think. Yeah, it is 10 years actually this year. Wow. We have to have an anniversary.
Congratulations.
And we've played in this area of change and human behaviour and how do you shift from this to that and how do you help people make that shift? And leaders always play a critical role in that and helping them to understand how they can lead themselves and then how they lead others.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there for someone listening, but they're all key points and things you have to consider, that the AI or the technology is just going to amplify those things unless you model everything the right way and treat your team respectfully and have that right culture. Just touching on what you mentioned there, that I think you're probably in a unique position just in general from the business and what you guys have been doing, which is, you mentioned you started in 2019 with just general AI and technology, and then I'm assuming you saw a lot of change in from the CEOs or the boards and people reaching out. My guess is going to be the middle of last year would have been the difference, not when ChatGPT was released in 2023. It would have been 2022 would have been like probably the 6 months after that wave came in. Then everyone probably thought they were falling behind. And how have you seen that shift in what people are doing, trying to play catch up potentially in the way that I've interpreted what people have been doing, which is the shitbots, as you mentioned before?
Are you allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Look, I think there's so much in, variation in where organisations are at. When the large language model of ChatGPT sort of exploded, we were hearing from directors that in boards that, well, can't we just put this in our business and then get rid of our call centre? It's like, wow, we're so far from that.
You could try.
Back away from your keyboard.
Experiment.
And it's still a lagging sort of conversation in a lot of industries and organisations. And again, that comes back to the leadership and where they're at, how they're educating themselves, how they're looking at their industry, how they're looking at their own skills in the context of where their industry is potentially going. Do they want a competitive advantage? Do they want to get in early, or do they want to be a little bit slower, but maybe more thoughtful around what it means in their business? So there's still a lot of variations on what we're seeing with clients. When we started we started our business at the end of 2018, and then into 2019, we actually left to build our own technology. It's a very similar story to why you started your podcast, in terms of we didn't spend a lot of money on building tech that didn't work. Mm-hmm. Because what we noticed as we were doing the research, and we did some coding programs and some startup tech programs, was we sort of took a step back and looked at because our initial idea was how could we build all of our knowledge over all the years about supporting leaders to be better leaders of change and what that practically meant in their words and actions every day and the tools that they had to help them. We thought that'd be great in a little expert in your pocket. And as the more we did the research and looked at, well, what does it take to build something like that, and looked at what was happening in the world, we could see AI coming. And we were like, hang on a minute. Whoa, the world is not ready for this. Organisations aren't ready for this. So that's why we started to lean into, actually, AI change is coming. And this is what you need to be thinking about. And we got deep in understanding it right from then. And that's obviously built and changed as the technology and has changed over those years and the different opportunities that it represents in organisations. And also, there are still some organisations who will look at the people side of the intelligent technology coming into their business as something that is too expensive. I don't have to worry about it. We'll just figure it out as we go. And it's traditionally why change management started as a profession all those years ago, because people were just throwing products that had been built and developed over the fence and expecting someone would catch it on the other side and understand what was going on and, just release something, and no one knew it was coming and no one understood it. Why are we doing this? So there's no surprise to me why there are still some leaders who are going, we don't need to worry about that, but it will catch up to them because they will pay for it eventually. What it will mean, though, if they're not thinking about their people proactively, it generally will cost them 2 or 3 times as much and take them at least twice as long to get to where they need to go. And that's research coming out of a Microsoft study. And ProSide does consistent research on that too. So you have to do it at some point. It's just, are you paying for it and are you doing it proactively? Our starting position is you should put as much time, effort, money into the human side of intelligent technology in your business as you are the actual technology. Because you can have all the technology you want, but there's an integration point where it hits a person. That person could be your customer. So how are they making sense of it? How are you thinking about them making sense of it? And what does it mean for them? And how are they supported to want to engage with it? And when it's broken, what are the alternatives? And then, or it could be that integration point could be your team. What does it mean for them? What does it mean for their skills? What does it mean for the work that they do that they might have really enjoyed before? How is that shifting? How do they still stay connected to your purpose and, values as a business because you've thought about that in advance? And it doesn't have to be big and complicated and expensive to do that thoughtful, we call it having a thoughtful plan. It doesn't have to be expensive or, over the top. But what it is just that strategy to go, actually, this is how we're going to care for our people through this process so we don't spend more money, take longer, disrupt our culture, do a whole bunch of damage to relationships in the business just because we thought, let's turn this thing on and see how it goes.
It's a fine line potentially to balance depending on the type of leader you are or the organisation, the culture that you have. But taking time just to plan how to implement the technology once you understand what it's capable of. Because if you haven't got that fluency, if we go back to that word again, you're going to make the wrong decisions or you're going to blindside the team or and the culture will suffer. So then you will go into those problems. So I think it really is, just planning. So our whole idea is we call it the DevReady podcast, and we have the DevReady process, which is we help you get development ready. So we do a lot of planning and everything up front before any development happens. So we're all about plans. So unless
because that's the go slow to go fast, isn't it? I use that a lot. Like this is let's just take a minute, get really clear, get aligned, make sure we've got some things in place to support leaders and to support them, to support their people to go through this process. Make it really clear why you're doing this, what the outcomes are that you're looking for, and what people's role is and how you want them to play and how you're setting them up for success. So to your point, your DevReady process sounds quite similar to that, where you're like, okay, let's just take a minute. Yeah. Let's get really clear.
Or 4 to 6 weeks.
Let's also get clear on what happens next.
Yes, exactly. It's all about clarity.
Yeah,
and
it's not, you're not saying, oh, let's just slow everything. We're not saying slow everything down for 6 months.
No, it's plan the right thing so you can build it once. This is where we throw out everyone's favorite term, so agile. We still work in sprints, but there's a plan that we follow for 3 to 6 months that's already been decided on, because we've spent all this time up front where we maybe pivoted 10 times so we can get to the right spot before we start, rather than pivoting as you do it. And unless you have that fluency on that AI and understand how your culture works, you'll have trouble implementing something first time if you haven't planned, and there'll be lots of pivots. You may start affecting the culture and morale and affecting people and making decisions before you should have made a decision, potentially, because you haven't seen the correct outcomes because you made a decision or you implemented something the wrong way. Yeah, and I think there's if we go for a practical example for the audience, you've got Microsoft Copilot now that's available in enterprises. If you're not clear about what you're giving that access to and how you want people to use that in your organisation and what are the rules and guardrails around it, having a really clear responsible use policy for anything AI, whether it's a Copilot or another large language model that the organisation allows their people to use. If they haven't looked at their risk framework, if they haven't thought about what are the habits and behaviours they want their people to have as a collective in their business, which is your culture, if you haven't looked at the impacts to that, then you could be turning something on that creates a whole lot of noise and disruption because you haven't thought about it in advance. And so then you've got a lot of extra work. There goes all your efficiencies and then some, because it will take you more than what you thought you were going to save. And not only does it have that short-term sort of disruption or perceived short-term disruption, there's a longer-term legacy that you'll create. And this is also something that's been around for forever. Humans' ability to remember things that didn't go so well is like a superpower, unfortunately. It's our negativity bias in our brain. We remember all the crappy things far easier than we remember, the good things that happen. So you're creating a legacy of an experience of intelligent technology that is going to set people back. It's going to make them more fearful, which we know then shuts down those critical parts of the brain that we need access to, particularly at a time of change like that. So if you're just turning on a Copilot and not thinking about how it's got access or how your people use it in a meeting, for example, we have a meeting, you rock up late, Copilot's already doing the transcript of the meeting. Anthony's always late. He's just so hard to work with. It drives me crazy. I think they're trying to get rid of him. I'm not sure, but I think they should get rid of him. All of that is in the transcript. And so Anthony rocks up late, types into Copilot, hey, I was late. Was my name mentioned or what's happened? And here it all is just surfaced. So you have to late.
Yeah, so you have to really understand the capabilities of the technology and then go, well, what does that mean around it? How do we talk to our people about, this is how it works in reality. This is what it means in terms of potential implications to how you think and talk and act in this business. So, going back to hopefully you've got really good articulated values in a business, we need to make sure we're aligned to our values, or we might need to refresh them or update them or change them to be more relevant in the context of the modern day world where things are highly connected and there will be that more pressure on human to human relationships.
Yeah, and that that education will go a long way to help
It's the
improve
place to
problem
start.
solving.
Yeah, absolutely. Start. There's so many free resources out there. There's, connections on LinkedIn and, start. Leaders particularly need to lean into this for themselves and for their teams. So you can do that in really cool ways. You can do like 15-minute talks at lunch, a 5-minute update at the start of a team meeting or something. Hey, has anyone seen this? This is the benefits. This is the opportunities. These are the things to look out for. So, really have that as something that's on your daily about what are you learning today? How do you help make sense of that for yourself and the people that are in your care in terms of the organisation?
Yeah, there's a lot of takeaways from this episode for anyone out there that's probably feeling overwhelmed with how to start or where to get moving with the phrase that I've liked that you mentioned, the intelligent technologies, not just ChatGPT, was probably what's on the top of everyone's mind. If anyone wants to find out more and reach out, how could they do that, Leisa?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. Obviously, LinkedIn is always a great place to connect. Myself, Leisa Hart, or Dr. Deborah Panapucci, and we've got AI Adaptive on LinkedIn, but we also have a website and a knowledge centre. And in our knowledge centre, we have a list of trusted resources. Some of them are research papers, some of them are books, some of them are other podcasts and things to listen to. We've written some articles. We also have our own podcast called Humans and AI in the Workplace that we've just started doing this year, which is a whole other learning curve. And that's really aimed at leaders or anyone really who's interested in what they need to be thinking about in their business as intelligent technology comes into the workplace.
And we'll add those links to the show notes and share that out on socials as well. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. I'm sure we could have gone for another hour. I'm conscious of the time. Thank you for your time today, Leisa, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. It's been lovely to sit and have a chat with you and also, hear a bit about the DevReady work.
Yep. Well, thank you.